If you can read this letter in French, marry my son." Colonel Winchester's words echoed through the dining room like mocking thunder. Everyone laughed, but no one knew that Esther had a secret she had learned in the shadows, silently, word by word, for 3 long years. Winchester Plantation, Virginia, 1857. The sun was rising over the cotton fields when Esther awoke in the small room she shared with her mother, Ruth, in the slave quarters. At 22, Esther's eyes held a light unlike that of the other women who worked on the plantation. It was a flame that no one could extinguish, fueled by a single memory: the face of Thomas Winchester. Thomas had left to study in France 3 years ago. Before that, when they were just children, he had done something forbidden, something dangerous. He taught Esther to read and write in English. Hidden in the barn, among bales of hay, the blonde, blue-eyed boy shared his books with the dark-skinned girl who looked at him with infinite admiration. "Why do you do this, Mr. Thomas?" Esther had asked one afternoon when she was only 12 years old. "Don't call me sir," he had said, smiling. "We're friends, Esther, and friends share treasures. Words are the greatest treasure there is." But Colonel Charles Winchester had found out. He didn't punish his son directly, but sent Thomas to Europe. "A Winchester doesn't mix with slaves," he thundered. "You need to learn your place in the world, boy." Now, 3 years later, Esther would walk up to the main house with her mother, Ruth, carrying the breakfast trays. But while Ruth went in through the back door, Esther would find excuses to go through the hallway that led to the study. There, hidden behind the green velvet curtains, she listened. The refined voice of Mrs. Beaumont, a French teacher hired to educate Catherine Winchester, the colonel's daughter, floated down the corridor. "Repeat after me, mademoiselle. Beauty resides in the elegance of the mind." Esther whispered the words, recording each sound, each inflection. Her heart pounded. If she were discovered, she would be whipped, but she couldn't stop. At night, in the silence of the small room, by the light of a candle she had stolen from the pantry, Esther practiced. She wrote French words in the hard-packed earth with a stick. She quickly erased them with her bare foot when she heard footsteps. "What are you doing, daughter?" Ruth had asked one night, watching her with concern. "I'm dreaming, Mom." "Dreams can kill a person like us, Esther." "Then let me die dreaming." Ruth sighed, recognizing in her daughter the same stubbornness that had allowed her to survive so many horrors. "You're doing this for him, aren't you?" Esther didn't need to answer. Ruth knew. That afternoon, while serving lemonade on the veranda where Catherine and her friends were chatting, Esther heard the news that made her heart race. "Thomas returns next week," exclaimed Catherine, waving a letter. 3 years in Paris. Imagine how refined he must be." The young ladies giggled and speculated about balls and suitors. No one noticed when the tray in Esther's hands trembled slightly, spilling a drop of lemonade onto the white marble. "Watch out, you clumsy thing," Catherine shouted. "You're as stupid as your mother." "Excuse me, miss," Esther murmured, lowering her eyes. But inside, a hurricane of emotions raged. Thomas was coming back. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of secret learning. She didn't know what would happen, but a certainty burned in her chest like embers. She needed him to see her. Not as a slave, but as someone who had grown, who had learned, who had transformed. That night, Ruth found her daughter kneeling beside the narrow bed. "Are you praying?" he asked softly. "Yes, Mother. I ask the Lord to give me strength, to show me the way, and to protect my heart, because I know it can be broken." Ruth embraced her daughter, silent tears rolling down her face, marked by suffering. She knew that pain. She knew the price of loving in a world that forbade love. A week later, the Winchester estate was in celebration. Japanese lanterns adorned the gardens. Musicians loosened their instruments, and the main house glowed with all its candles lit. Thomas Winchester was back. Esther watched from afar, from the corner of the kitchen where she helped prepare the dishes for the banquet. Her heart almost stopped when she saw him get out of the carriage. He was different. taller, with a neatly trimmed beard, wearing an elegant grey suit. But his eyes were the same, blue as a summer sky. "Stop staring," Ruth whispered, pulling her by the arm. "You'll attract attention." But it was too late. For a second, just 1 second, Thomas's eyes met Esther's through the kitchen window. He blinked, as if trying to recall something distant, something lost in time. During dinner, Esther and Ruth served in silence. Colonel Winchester presided over the table, his booming voice dominating the conversation. "My son has returned a true gentleman. Paris has done wonders for you, Thomas." "Thank you, Father," Thomas replied politely. But Esther noticed that he seemed uncomfortable, as if that world of luxury and hypocrisy no longer suited him perfectly. Catherine chattered about her piano and French lessons, showing off. "Madame Beaumont says I have perfect pronunciation. You should hear me recite Molière, Thomas." "Certainly, sister," he said, but his eyes wandered around the room. They stopped again on Esther, who had poured wine into her glass. This time, he observed her more closely. Do I know you?" Silence fell upon the table like a blade. "Of course you don't know her," said Colonel Winchester sharply. "She's just a slave. Serve the wine and get out of here." Esther lowered her head and stepped back, but her heart screamed, "It's me, Thomas. Esther, don't you remember?" That night, while everyone was asleep, Esther walked to the barn where, years ago, Thomas had taught her to read. The full moon illuminated the hay bales just as it had back then. She sat in the same spot, hugged her knees, and wept. "Lord Jesus," she prayed softly, "I don't understand your ways. Why put love in my heart if that love can never be? But I trust that you have a plan, even when everything seems impossible." A voice startled her. "Esther?" She turned around. Thomas was in the barn entrance holding a lantern. He was wearing only a shirt and trousers, his hair disheveled. "Mr. Thomas." She began to stand, but he gestured for her to remain seated. "I remember," he said softly, drawing closer. "You were just a girl, but your eyes, those eyes I would never forget. How you've grown. You've changed too. Please don't call me sir. Not here." They talked for hours. Thomas told him about Paris, about the wide streets and cafes where people discussed freedom and equality, about books he had read, ideas that had transformed him. "There's a growing movement there, Esther. People who believe that slavery is a terrible sin against God. I've seen how different the world can be. And you, what do you believe?" Thomas looked at her intently. "I believe my father is wrong, that this system is an abomination, and I believe," he hesitated, "that I recognize courage when I see it. Do you still read?" Esther nodded shyly. "Show me." With trembling hands, she picked up the stick and wrote in the dirt, "God is love." Thomas smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "You never gave up." "How could I? You gave me something that no one can take away. Knowledge. Hope. Esther, I need to tell you something. My father wants me to get married. There's a young woman from a good family he's chosen, but He paused, struggling with the words. "I can't stop thinking about you all these years." Esther's heart tightened. "We are from different worlds, Mr. Thomas. That will never change." "What if it changed?" he whispered intently. "What if there was a way?" But before he could continue, voices approached. It was the night patrol. Thomas quickly turned off the flashlight, and they both hid among the hay, hearts racing, aware of the dangerous proximity of their bodies. As the guards walked away, Thomas whispered in the darkness, "Keep learning, Esther. Keep being strong. Promise me that." "I promise." In the following days, Esther intensified her secret studies. She would wake before dawn to listen to Madame Beaumont's lessons. She practiced elegant gestures while cleaning the rooms. She observed how Catherine held her teacup, how she walked, how she spoke. Ruth noticed everything. "Daughter, what are you planning?" I'm not planning anything, Mom. I'm just preparing. Why? For a miracle. Ruth shook her head, but deep down a part of her admired her daughter's unwavering faith. Esther believed in something greater than that brutal reality. She believed that God could move mountains. Everything changed on the night of the grand banquet. Colonel Winchester had gathered the most important families in the region to celebrate Thomas's return. During dinner, Catherine tried to show off her talents by reciting in French, but she stammered and forgot the words. "You are letting our family down," thundered the colonel. Catherine began to cry. Madame Beaumont tried to defend her, but the colonel was irritated, probably from drinking too much wine. It was then that his wife, Lady Margaret Winchester, casually remarked, "Sometimes I wonder if all this money spent on education is worthwhile. Anyone could learn French with enough dedication." "Nonsense!" roared the colonel. "Education is for the well-bred. An ordinary person could never master the French language." Thomas, who had remained silent, spoke up. "You're wrong, Father. The ability to learn has nothing to do with birth." "Oh, really?" The colonel raised his glass, drunk and provocative. "Very well, let's do a test then." He looked around the room and his eyes landed on Esther and Ruth, who were serving discreetly. "You there, the slave!" Esther froze. "Yes, you, come here." With trembling legs, Esther approached the main table. All the guests watched her with curiosity and disdain. "My son says anyone can learn. Very well." The colonel was clearly drunk. "I'll make a ridiculous proposal to prove my point." He picked up the letter that was on the table, a correspondence in French from a business associate. "If you can read this letter in French, I'll allow you to marry my son." The room erupted in laughter. Catherine laughed hysterically. The guests banged on the tables. Lady Margaret covered her face, ashamed of her drunken husband. "Charles, you're drunk!" she exclaimed. "I'm giving a demonstration," he yelled. "Come on, slave, read or admit your ignorance." Ruth stepped forward, trying to protect her daughter. "Sir, please." "Silence!" thundered the colonel. "Let the girl answer." Thomas was pale, gripping the edge of the table. His eyes met Esther's, and in them she saw something that strengthened her, faith in herself. Esther stared at the letter. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The whole room awaited her humiliation. That was what they wanted. To see a broken, shamed slave put in her place. But then she remembered. She remembered the nights practicing by candlelight. She remembered young Thomas teaching her to read. She remembered every whispered word she had stolen from Madame Beaumont's lessons. And she remembered the prayers, the pleas to God for strength. "May I try, sir?" His voice came out clear and firm. The colonel, surprised by the audacity, pushed the letter toward him. "You can try and fail, as we all know will happen." Esther took the letter firmly in her hands. Her eyes scanned the French words. The room was now completely silent, awaiting confirmation of its inferiority. She took a deep breath and began to read. "Mr. Winchester, I am pleased to inform you that your investment in our company has produced exceptional results." Her pronunciation was perfect. Each word flowed like music. Madame Beaumont rose from her chair, speechless. Catherine had stopped laughing, her face red with shock and humiliation. The guests exchanged incredulous glances. The colonel was as white as a sheet. Esther continued, her voice growing more confident. "This year's profits have exceeded all our expectations. We are honored to maintain this successful business relationship with your distinguished family." When she finished, she placed the letter delicately on the table. The silence in the room was sepulchral. Thomas stood there, tears in his eyes, a smile of pride and astonishment on his face. She read," someone murmured. Colonel Winchester found his voice first, but it came out shaky, dangerous. How? "I learned, sir," Esther said simply, "as anyone can learn if given the chance." "You were spying, stealing knowledge that doesn't belong to you." "Knowledge belongs to no one, Father," said Thomas, finally finding the courage. "It belongs to God, and God gives wisdom to those who seek it." "You!" the colonel pointed at Thomas. "You taught her when she was a child. You disobeyed my orders." "Yes, I taught, and I don't regret it, because what I saw today proves that character and intelligence have no color, no class. They only have humanity." Lady Margaret was in tears. Catherine had fled the room, humiliated. The guests began to whisper amongst themselves, scandalized. "You made a promise, sir," said Esther, her voice firm despite the fear she felt, "in front of everyone. If I read the letter in French, I could marry your son. That was a joke, a drunken provocation." "A promise is a promise," said Thomas, approaching Esther, "and I accept it." The room exploded. Shouts of outrage, chairs being pushed, women fainting dramatically. "Never!" roared the colonel. "I'd rather see him dead than married to a slave." "Then watch me die, Father, because I choose Esther. I choose what is right in the eyes of God." Ruth pulled her daughter aside. "Esther, we need to leave. Now!" But before they could move, the colonel gave an order. "Guards, arrest that slave. She will be whipped tomorrow at dawn as an example. No one disobeys the laws of this house." Thomas positioned himself between Esther and the guards. "They'll have to get past me first." "So be it," the colonel said coldly. "Arrest them both." Esther and Thomas were taken to separate cells in the mansion's basement. Ruth begged on her knees but was dragged out. Night fell over the Winchester estate like a cloak of darkness. In the cold, damp cell, Esther knelt on the stone floor. "Lord Jesus," she prayed through tears, "I don't understand. I did everything right. I learned, I grew, I had faith. Why is this happening? But even so, I trust. Even if you take me from this earth tomorrow, I trust in your plans." On the other side of the wall, Thomas was also praying, "God, forgive my father. He doesn't know what he's doing. And if this is the price for doing what is right, for defending what the Lord taught about love and equality, then I accept it. But please, protect Esther. Save her." Neither of them knew it, but their prayers ascended to heaven together that night. Hours before dawn, hurried footsteps echoed in the corridor. The door to Thomas's cell opened. It was Madame Beaumont, accompanied by Ruth and two men whom Thomas recognized as members of the Virginia Abolitionist Society. "Quickly," whispered Madame Beaumont, "we don't have much time." Madame Beaumont is part of the movement," Ruth explained quickly. "She helps slaves escape. She has for years." Madame opened Esther's cell. "You need to go, now. There's a carriage waiting that will take you north." "But my father—" "Your father is sleeping on the wine," said Madame. "By morning, you'll be far away. There are people who will help you cross the border." Esther hugged her mother, sobbing. "Mother, come with us." Ruth shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, daughter, I'm old. But you have a whole life ahead of you. Go, be free, be happy. That's all a mother could wish for. I'll come back for you, I promise. I know, my girl, I know." Thomas and Esther fled through the night, hidden in a covered carriage. For days they traveled along the Underground Railroad, the secret network of abolitionists that helped slaves achieve freedom in the North. When they finally crossed into free territory, they fell to their knees on the damp earth and prayed, thanking God for their deliverance. "What will we do now?" asked Esther. Thomas held her hands. "We're going to get married. I'm going to work, study law. I'm going to fight to end this damned institution, and one day we'll come back for your mother and everyone who stayed behind." And 3 years later, after the Civil War had finally ended and slavery had been abolished, Thomas and Esther Winchester returned to Virginia. He was now a respected lawyer working for the rights of freedmen. She was a teacher who taught black children to read and write. They found Ruth still alive, working in the ruins of what had been the Winchester estate. The colonel had died during the war. Catherine had married and moved to New York. Lady Margaret lived alone in the dilapidated mansion. When Ruth saw her daughter, now a free woman elegantly dressed beside the man she loved, she fell to her knees and wept. "God is faithful," she whispered. "He always has been." Thomas bought the Winchester estate with money he had honestly earned. He transformed it into a school for freed children. Where there had once been cotton fields worked by slaves, there were now classrooms where black children learned French, mathematics, and history. And every night before going to sleep, Esther would open her Bible and read aloud, "All things work together for good to those who love God." She hadn't understood that dark night in prison. But God had a plan bigger than she could imagine, a plan that would transform not only her life, but the lives of hundreds of others. Love had won, faith had triumphed, and the courage of a young slave girl who refused to accept the limitations imposed by the world had changed everything. In the renovated barn, now a library, there was a bronze plaque that Thomas had commissioned. In this place, a girl learned that knowledge is freedom, and a boy learned that love knows no barriers. May all who enter here remember, before God, we are all equal, all loved, all capable of reaching for the stars. Did you enjoy this story of faith, love, and courage? What touched you the most? Subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories that strengthen the soul. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any inspiring journeys. Leave a comment telling us which moment moved you the most. Your story could be next. Sign up now and become part of this family that believes in the transformative power of faith.